Welcome back to another episode of Adeptus Paternus. I have with me John Kilcommons, a twin brother of a really good friend of mine and one of the best Tau players in the world, here to talk about the Tau Grotmas detachment. How you doing, John?
Good, Nick. I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me. And very exciting day for Tau players. We thought we were going to get left out in the dust. At least I did by GW with no change to the balance slate. So pretty excited about this one, this detachment. I think there's a lot of play here. I think there's a lot of depth to the detachment, and yeah, I think there's some sauce. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, let's get into it. So the detachment is called Auxiliary Cadre, which I think should already give a clue as to what's going on. And there are two detachment rules, one for the Kroot and Vespid Stingwings, the auxiliaries, and then one for Tau Empire units excluding Kroot and Vespid Stingwings. So for the aliens, well, the aliens, Kroot and Vespids, you have targeting triangulation, which is an aura. So while an enemy unit is within 9 inches of and visible to this unit each time a ranged attack made by a friendly Tau Empire model, excluding Kroot, Vespid, and Titanic models, targets that enemy unit, improve the AP by 1. And then,
Yeah. So,
yeah.
oh, go ahead. You wanted to go through the second?
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's just
go
go through the
go ahead.
second one because I think it kind of, all of this works in tandem. So, yeah.
Sure. Exactly. Yeah. Let's do it.
And so for the Tau, everybody else, they have an aura when a friendly Kroot or Vespid Stingwing unit is wholly within 6 and visible. Kind of rough that it has to be wholly within, but that's okay. That Kroot or Vespid Stingwings unit can only be selected as the target of a ranged attack if the attacking model is within 18 inches. So, the Nurgle strat, essentially. The new one, the 18-inch one, but still, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I think this is a pretty dang strong detachment rule. The It kind of takes the elements of like some of the strongest strats from both Tau Empire detachments and Kroot detachments. So an example would be extra AP in Monka. So
Right.
you pick two units, spend a CP, and that's like one of the better strats in Monka. But now you just have a 9 inch aura coming from half of your army. You just have to have some visibility towards them, but you're really going to want to throw Kroot, Vespid towards those, um, towards the midfield objective. So it should be easy to proc. So I think just like very strong detachment rule, and then getting the 18-inch loan up again, one of the better strats in the Kroot detachment. It's a lot easier to proc than you would think because a Tal Empire
Sure.
unit is also like for example, uh, a big tank, you know.
Right.
So it could be like a hammerhead or like a 6 inch aura off a hammerhead is huge,
Mm-hmm.
and you could also use other loan ops to proc it. Uh,
Have somebody
Something
behind
that
a
comes to
wall.
mind exactly like stealth suits. They love to just hang out near your expansion objective, behind the the boilerplate essentially, and you could probably put like one single Kroot out on the objective and still be loan opt. An
Exactly.
important aspect is also they sticky, so it's really interesting for Tau, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it might be hard, except when you think about it, it really isn't. I mean, there's a lot. You can engineer situations where the Kroot are visible to your unit, but not, yeah, but your unit is not visible to the enemy. So even if it's not a lone up, it's totally doable. You just string one guy back so that the guy within the ruin can, the Tau within the ruin can see him. And I mean, anytime that you can do this, like it's good. There's just so much play. It opens up so many like scoring opportunities that all of a sudden you don't have to trade anymore. You can just you can have your cake and eat it too. You can do,
Yep.
you know, uh, I don't know, containment where potentially like it's on a firing lane, but your guys are not going to get shot off, which is great. I think though that the first part, the targeting triangulation, I mean, of any buff that you can get, improving AP is by and large one of the better ones
Yep.
because just the way that the dice work out, it's fantastic, and it's also one of the few buffs that if your opponent, say like the Silent King who can ignore mods, they can't ignore that
Mm-hmm.
mod.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think as you'll see with the strats in the detachment as we go through them, they do a really good job of catering to the strengths of Tau Empire units and crew units, and this is an area that it helps a lot of units that weren't seen as much with Tau, but in, um, other than like very specific instances. So an example would be like the missile pod fire knife unit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're AP1, they weren't seen a ton, right? Because of armor of contempt, you know,
Yeah.
into a marine unit, they're saving on 3-ups. It's not very good, but all of a sudden your AP2 ignores cover, and the marine unit can only use AOC on one activation. Like, did they use that on that activation? Um, Another example would be like Riptides, with they have a gun that nobody's ever really heard of, which is their burst cannon, right? So it's 12
Mm-hmm.
shots at strength 7 AP1 for 2. Now it's strength 7 AP2 for 2. Pair that with ignores cover. It gets pretty nasty, and yeah, same thing with like the Meltas, right? They're so good in retaliation cadre because they're AP5. Right? They just melt through, um, marine vehicles. Well, you get access to this in this detachment.
Yeah, I mean, the extra AP, when you're combining that with ignores cover, just gets to so many breakpoints. I mean, for those 2-up, 4-ups that don't have access to Armor of Contempt, I mean, you're just putting them on their invul, which is super annoying to them. And I mean, that is one of the issues that Tau can have, is getting through, extra tough targets. I mean, when I've been playing with my Necrons, like running the Silent King, he usually just doesn't die. I mean, unless you throw like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of melta shots at him, and even then he might not. Um, but if you're able to then, and it's like the meltas were usually the only thing that could do anything because there just wasn't enough AP otherwise. So
Mm-hmm.
getting that elsewhere, but then also the fact that this is not restricted in the same way as that Monka strat of like you because both have to shoot at the same thing, and this is
Exactly, and
much more
also you
free.
only get it. You only get it the 3 rounds. You only get it turns 1, 2, and 3. So it's less avoidable, right? Like if you're playing Kalyan or Monka, your opponent just like sits there and it's like, wait a second. So your rules only work the first 3 turns of the game or
Mm-hmm.
the last 3 turns of the game? Okay, let me like try to interact with you as least as possible those turns. Like if you're playing Kalyan, I'll just shove on you turn 1 or 2. If you're playing Monka, like and you're playing Star Shatter, like that's an auto lose to me
Yeah,
because for other reasons as well, but also because my rules turn off turns 4 and 5.
yeah, and I mean it's also there's little the little indirect missiles, right? The that if you can just manage
Oh
to
yeah,
get somebody to see them, all of a sudden those are getting some AP on them, which
sure.
is super nice. I mean, they actually can pick up trash potentially as opposed to just chipping away at them slowly. So
Yeah, 100%. I didn't even think about that. Thanks for the idea.
yeah. The one thing that I think makes this not like completely stupid broken is the fact that you do have to be within 9 inches, so you can't just deep strike your Vespids and
Hmm.
get that out. You have to do a little bit of planning and positioning in order to achieve this. It's not impossible. It's just not
Yeah.
a gimme.
Yeah,
So
exactly. There is some nice give and take. Like I don't think it's broken by any chance, but um I think it gives a lot of there are a lot of tools as you'll see. We'll talk through the enhancements, but we'll get some tools to get up in your face. And thankfully, like Crute aren't the most valuable resource in the world, so you're
they're
kind of
cheap.
doing what you already were planning. Yeah, you kind of already you're doing what you already were planning on doing, which is primary denial, screening, move blocking, and all those things tend to get you within 9 inches invisible to an enemy unit.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, hey, if they really want to give you that much space, then you're probably winning anyway.
Yeah, true that.
So, all right,
True
let's get
that.
into the enhancements. The first one is the Student of Kalyan for 15 points.
Hmm.
This is a Crute Shaper model only. In the Declare Battle Formation step, you can select up to 3 Crute Carnivores or Crute Firestalkers units and give them Deep Strike.
I think this is pretty spicy. So the one thing, why don't we actually should we go through all the enhancements, or
Sure, we
should
can
we
go
go
through
one
all
by
of them
one?
all at once. Next is
All right, cool. Let's do it.
Admired Leader for 20 points. Now, this is a Tau Empire model excluding Crute. In your
Mhm.
command phase, you can select one Crute or Vespid Stingwings unit within 12 inches of the bearer. Until the start of your next command phase, you improve the leadership characteristic by 1, and when it's not battle shocked, add 1 to the objective control of models in that unit. The next one is Fanatical Convert for 10 points. This is for a Crute model. The Bears unit has the For the Greater Good ability. And then finally, the Transponder Lock Module, 25 points. Um, this is for a Tau Walker model with the Deep Strike ability only. The Bearer's unit can be set up using the Deep Strike ability in the reinforcement step of your. So this means not rapid ingress, just in your
Hmm.
reinforcement step, first, second, or third movement phase. That's funny how they phrase that way. Anyway, regardless of any mission
Hmm.
rules, during your first movement phase, when you set up the Bears unit, it must be set up within 12 inches of one or more friendly Kroot or Vespid Stingwings unit, and not within 9 inches of one or more enemy units. So those are all pretty good. I mean,
Yeah, so I would say when I'm thinking about like list building, for example, this brings up like a couple interesting points, right? So like the first one, I kind of think so you're spending 15 points for the enhancement and you're spending there's like a couple different shapers you can take. One of them is the trail shaper. He gives you like a reactive move and redeploys. The other one is the war shaper. He gives you, I want to say it's sustained in melee plus um, some other buff that I can't remember off the top of my head. But I kind of look at it as like a little bit of a tax. Like that's
mm-hmm.
70 points that could go into like another crew carnivore unit. So I have to play around with these to see whether or not it's worth that tax because I could also just see you running, 3 units carnivores, 3 units accrued, and then like basically a gun line behind. So that all being said, um, being able to rapid ingress crew units is really strong, I think.
Yes.
And I'll have to check, but stealth suits allow you to rapid ingress within 3 for free. I'll have to check if that's Tau Empire models, or you can also do that for Kroot as well. Because if you could do that, that'd be really helpful. Because I find that this attachment you're going to want to be using a lot of the strats. So, but that being said, there's a lot of really cool plays here, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things like the I always hesitate to like make plans around deep striking simply because it's you if you're going to create a list idea around that, you're going to come across a lot of matchups where it simply does not work. And then you've
Hmm.
paid a tax for nothing. When in a lot
Hmm.
of the cases, if it would have worked, maybe just strategic reserves would have been sufficient anyway. And there's nothing
Hmm.
stopping you from just putting those same units in strategic reserves. I mean, yeah, okay, you're a little bit more limited in what you can do, but it's not like you don't have access to other deep striking units that give you the same benefits as the Kroot for this detachment, namely the Vespid Stingwings. So it's really hard for me to see why you would need like say 5 deep striking auxiliaries.
That's a great point. Because one thing that I was going to bring up, Jack Arpster mentioned it on the Outer War stream today, but being able to deep strike onto objectives within the 18-inch loan up, right? So if you have stealth suits within 6 of an
Sure.
objective,
Yeah.
you put one Vespid on the point. If they don't have something within 9, they're just going to end up giving you free primary because you can just put units in the open and have an 18-inch loan up on them. So that's really strong. But again, you don't really need this enhancement to do that.
Right.
So it's really going to depend. It's something that I'm going to have to play test and see like, hey, are these necessary? Same thing with Admired Leader. I think it's a cute enhancement. Like I see the value in it, right? You can start bringing hounds, but then you need a non-Kroot model within 12 inches of those hounds. What non-Kroot model would that be? Like probably a commander, probably not an ethereal, probably not a Cadre Fireblade. So you're going to want to keep like a commander model central to your army. So, and usually those are units you're going to want to be deep striking in
Mm-hmm.
or rapid ingressing because those are probably cold stars that you're giving assault. So, again, I mean, I think it's really strong, but I have to play around with it to see whether it's going to be worth it or not. And then the transponder lock module. So Tau Empire Walker model, that's just a commander essentially. So which commander are you going to want to deep strike in turn one? Usually you're not going to be getting shots or an ideal target turn one on something that you really want to hit, um, other than like a trash unit, like or an
Yeah.
infiltrating unit, and usually that's not really a trade that's worth it. So I, although I think it's really cool, I don't think it's particularly the competitive pick.
No, I mean, because I think about like the kinds of units that love coming in early like that, and it's something. I mean, it's basically the Thunderwolves, right? When they were doing
Mm-hmm.
Stormlance,
Yeah,
but that's because they're
sure.
friggin' hard to kill. Stealth suits are
Mm-hmm.
not particularly hard to kill. So
Yeah, crisis suits. Yeah, yeah, they're
yeah,
not.
crisis suits. I mean, yeah, they're not
Yeah.
particularly hard to kill, and so you really are going to just be throwing them away, and that's an expensive piece to throw away to not necessarily get a line of sight on anything in particular. If you could rapid them turn one, then it might be more enticing, but
Mm-hmm.
but you can't. So
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
but I do think that the fanatical convert model is, or the fanatical convert for 10 points. I mean, that's got to be pretty good if you can find a crew character that you want to put it on. Just to give you one more thing
Uh,
to sight with. I don't know.
yeah. Well, the thing is most of the like you're going to be taking your three stealth suits, your Pathfinder unit still. I think it's okay, just because it's not going to ignore cover. So, you know, like
Yeah,
at that point, it's not like super worth it. It's fine as like a 10-point enhancement, but I think if you're gonna go that route, you're probably taking like a crew model, like a crew shaper, let's say. You're probably gonna want to take only one, and you're putting the
the
student
student
the
of
Callion on
yeah,
him,
that makes sense.
as opposed to taking two to get the fanatical convert. So, um, but yeah, I think they're all pretty interesting, and yeah, we'll see if they turn out being valuable or not.
Yeah, I could
Just gotta
also
mess around with it a little bit.
see you taking none of them. I don't think that
That's true.
I don't think that the enhancements are what's central to this detachment. And
Hmm.
like hot take here, I actually like detachments where you don't necessarily have to take any of the enhancements and it
Hmm.
still is good. It just gives you a lot more flexibility on how you are going to list build. One of the things that I
Sure.
find super annoying with the updates, and this is a brief aside, but just to make my point on
Hmm.
this, with that's
Yeah.
changes to Hypercrypt and the introduction of Star Shatter. So now
Hmm.
Hypercrypt I used to run with no enhancements and I didn't need them, and now it's like crap. I have to take the 25.1 to get that one extra pickup that I didn't have to do before,
Yep.
and that's a tax because it's going to mean I have to take an
Hmm.
extra character that I didn't want to take before.
Hmm.
And similarly with Star Shatter, it's like, well, the detachment only works if you're taking the two ridiculous enhancements. I mean, okay, I say only, but it's not its peak unless you take those two. And now you have two characters
Sure.
that you might have had no interest in taking otherwise, who contribute nothing
Hmm.
beyond just being vehicles for those enhancements, and that's actually kind of expensive and it really
Hmm.
limits what you can build. So I don't have a problem
Yep.
with mediocre enhancements as long. I'd rather have good strats and mediocre enhancements than the other way around.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think to your point, this detachment is gonna it's gonna win games based off of its detachment rule and strats as opposed to
Yeah.
auto take enhancements.
Yep. Well, then let's get into the strats. You want me to read them all again and then we'll start discussing, or you want me to go one by one?
Maybe one by one because some of these are
Sure.
a little bit more complex, but yeah, one by one, I think.
All right. So, number one, experimental modifications, shooting or fight phase for 1 CP. This is the Crute or Vespids. Until the end of the phase, improve AP by 1.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one, and it kind of goes back to the list building again. I would say is if you're building into your list a carnivore unit that hits, um, then you're going to want this enhancement, right? You're going to, or sorry, to use the stratagem, right? You're going to get sustained on the one Crew Shaper unit. There's a character you can take, the Crew Lone Spear, that gives you full rerolls to hit, and then you stack this extra AP on them, and all of a sudden, those units hit pretty dang hard. Same thing with the Vespid. They have two shots each at 522, and some special weapons in the 10-man unit. So bumping that up to 532 is pretty serious. And again, like in melee, Kroot aren't really slouches when it comes to like getting a little bit of AP, getting the sustained full hit rerolls. They'll start to do some real damage to like you know actual units as opposed to like maybe killing a scout squad.
Yeah, and I think it pairs very nicely with. I mean, if you really want, if you have a thing that has to die and you're willing to spend the two
Mm-hmm.
CP in a particular situation, the next one pairs nicely, which is multi-sensory scanning, shooting or fight phase, a
Mm-hmm.
Tau Empire unit. So this is any Tau. If it's generic, reroll a wound roll of 1, but if it's Cruder Vespid, you can reroll the wound roll. So if you're in a situation where you're rerolling hits and wounds and you have extra AP, I mean that makes any mediocre profile actually kind of dangerous.
And it brings up another interesting unit here, which is the Krutox Rampagers, which
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to talk about. So the Rampagers have a they do dev wounds on the charge. They do mortals on a charge. I believe it's a 4 up to do D3 mortals for every unit within engagement range. And then when you stack the extra AP and the reroll the wound roll, they turn into a um, pretty damn good skirmish piece at 95 points for 3. And I think it's pretty funny to think about putting a lone op character like Shadow Sun, for example. You could basically put her in between your two staging ruins, right? Like the middle staging ruin and the staging ruin near your natural expansion, and you can literally just put like Shadow Sun plus the Rampagers like a little bit back out in the open, just waiting to get some work. So this also buffs those units pretty heavily and turn them into like a pretty serious skirmish piece that's more annoying to kill than you would really want it to be.
Yeah, and it is nice that you do have the option of just using it on any other Tau unit if you want to reroll ones. I mean, if you're,
Mm-hmm.
you know, shooting something with a hammerhead and you have with the railgun, let's say, um, it you are potentially wounding on twos. I mean, at least threes, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
getting that reroll ones, it just makes the small number of shots that much more reliable, and it could be worth it. And it's nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think the first
Same
two
thing with the
are
Vespa.
yeah. So yeah,
Yeah, pretty
exactly.
spicy.
I think they're pretty good at just generically very strong. All right.
Agreed.
Moving on, interlocking maneuvers, end of the fight phase. One Tau Empire unit that was eligible to fight this phase, uh,
Mm-hmm.
which is an interesting restriction. You don't. I mean, there's other things in the game like this, but it's kind of rare. If your unit
Mm-hmm.
is not within engagement range of one or more enemy units, it can make a normal move of up to 6 inches. Otherwise, your unit can make a fallback move. It cannot embark within a transport at the end of this turn if it disembarked from a transport this turn. So,
Mm-hmm.
not the easy. Like, I can see this being misplayed by people who don't
Mm-hmm.
read it closely because there's a few restrictions in there, but
Mm-hmm.
it feels really good.
I think it is really good. So it reminds me of the Renegade Raider strat.
Yeah.
I think it's very similar where like the bikers can make a normal move of 12 inches if they were eligible to fight. But being able to make a fallback move
Yeah.
makes this less restrictive, right? So
Yes.
you can charge something, not kill it, and then fall back, let's say with Farsight's unit 10 inches, fall back with um, another crisis unit, 12 inches. So I think it's kind of like a pseudo fire and fade. It's a little bit
Mm-hmm.
harder to pull off. But again, there's a lot of, I think this gives a lot of uh, flexibility to players, like player skill. There's like a lot of options you can, a lot of areas you could go with this. Either you could protect the unit, right? You can normal move it 12 inches back to safety somewhere, not have to give up that unit that probably came in and just did some pretty serious damage, or you can move block like half of your opponent's deployment zone. You could string across two objectives with 4 crisis suits, potentially deny some primary. This is one of those strats that's going to help with the survivability of your damage dealers. And as you can see, it's one Tau Empire unit. So like it could be anything. Like it could be a
Yeah.
Devilfish, it could be a Hammerhead, it could be a Riptide, it could be Crisis Suits, it could be Breachers. Um, so there's a lot of utility here, and and again, the nice part is it's not really pinning you into one specific archetype.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Fruit and Vespid are pretty central to this army, but like they're pretty good units on their own for what they cost. And you're already usually taking some of them anyways. So being able to have some flexibility around list building to take advantage of this strat in particular, I think is really awesome. And
Yeah,
yeah, I think it is really strong. Super sick that every one of these is one CP too.
that is good. I mean, this is almost as it's almost better than a fallback shoot and charge because
Mm-hmm.
it could be the end. Like they charged your tank, didn't kill it in melee for some reason, and you
Mm-hmm.
want to be able to shoot with it. You just make a fallback move,
True.
and you do it.
Yeah, at the end of the fight phase. Yeah, any
It
fight
doesn't
phase. Huh?
say your fight phase, any fight phase. So that's already good. I could also see if you need to send your crisis suits across the board for some reason. Maybe you're you're a little weak on the other side. You pick a tank that is not gonna die because you actually kind of don't want it to die to their melee. It's probably not
Mm-hmm.
anyway, but you charge it. You don't kill it, and then you fall back another 12 inches, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a total potentially of like say, depending on what the charge was, with the pile in move and everything. I mean, you could be getting like 30 inches of movement for one CP. So
Yeah,
because
and it's hard. Go ahead.
yeah, think of fall back, but I am always like, you can always fall forward, especially if you fly.
For sure. I to give some like just like one play that came to mind. So I played Scary at Champs Cup.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Scary was playing Drukari. He's playing Sky Splinter. They have the strat where they can make a fallback move after they've charged, and the witches get to do it any direction, like the witches unit with Lilith. Um, I He was staged behind his midfield ruin, charged a devilfish 9 inches, and then made the fallback move onto two of my midfield objectives to deny me 10 on primary. And the real power in this, I would say, or not like real power, but one of the strengths of it is it's very hard to see it coming.
Yeah.
Like it is not super telegraphed what your opponent's going to do with this stuff. Now, at the very end of it, I did realize what Scaria was doing, and I tried to heroic a Riptide on an 8-inch rerollable to block him out, which I didn't pass. But again, it swung the game in a massive way, and he did it from like 28 inches away.
Yep.
It was absurd. I was like, What's going on right now? Yeah, there's to your point, like falling forward, the primary and denial plays. Like there's a lot of value you can get out of this.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's the thing. Like, I think most people, when they think about, the being able to say fall back and charge, they only think of it just in, well, I'm just going to go right back into what I was fighting to begin with. And that might not be the best play. But this to me actually feels like like you said, the skill expression. This is the one that the top players are going to use to win games with this detachment if people are running it.
Absolutely.
I mean,
So what gets me excited about the detachment for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. I mean, killing stuff obviously is great, but there's I mean,
Sure.
it's not like Tower bad at killing things.
Mm-mm.
So, all right, next one, pheromone waypoints in your movement phase, crude or vespid, just auto advance 6. Cool.
Very nice. I mean, I would say that when I'm using crew, like right now, like I'm using them in Retaliation Cadre, I have like one unit, and they're typically they stick you my home, and then either they're screening or they try to deny my opponent's primary one time. And
Mm-hmm.
most of the time, I'm hoping to roll like a 5 or a 6. Like I'm usually like staging a ruin, and I need to roll like a 5 to get like 2 or 3 guys on the point and maybe deny it. Having the ability to just have a 13-inch move in your back pocket with Crude to just say, hey, I'm about to, if you don't put 10 OC on your objective,
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm just going to spend 1 CP to deny you 5 on primary is super strong because you're going to have Crude within the area code and they're going to be loan out. So it should be pretty easy to pull off to just press the 1 CP, deny your opponent 5 on primary button. And it's really nice that you can just have this guarantee and basically just tell your opponent like from across the table, like if you don't screen out these guys advancing onto the objective or prepare to kill these guys in a turn where you plan to hold that objective, it's not going to end well for you. So again, just another way of causing your opponent to overextend and prepare ahead of time, which like opens them up to getting shot
Mm-hmm.
by the castle. So
Yep. All right. Alien expertise. Your movement phase. One Tau Empire unit from your army until the end of the turn, eligible to shoot in a turn in which it advanced, and if it's crewed or vespid, then you can also charge.
so this is what gets me a little excited about the Krutux Rampagers because the Rampagers, I think for a skirmish unit, I think they have a lot of value. There's a lot of tools for them in this detachment with the rerolling the wound roll, increasing the AP, auto advance 6, and their biggest limitation was they only move 7 inches. So it was really hard to stage them in a way where they would be relevant um, in midfield objectives without getting hit first. So now you have not only the 18-inch loan op, which allows them to get closer than they normally would, but also not only auto advance 6, but also just rolling in advance and potentially, spending the CP to charge. So I think this strat is for these, for those types of units, and then also like the Tau Empire units. It's really nice to have in your back pocket that
Yeah.
your opponent has to, it. It's almost more important for the deterrent factor of, hey,
Mm-hmm.
I have advance and shoot in my back pocket if you're not careful. And if you give me the right opening, I'll take it and potentially kill a unit that you weren't expecting to. So it's just another way of controlling angles for this army, which is a really awesome include um, for the Tower Empire units because it's otherwise pretty pre-measurable. Like that's probably my biggest concern with Kauyon is it's a very pre-measurable detachment. Everything moves to 10. You'll have like one or two advance and shoot options, but having advance and shoot in your back pocket for any Tau Empire unit, I think is really awesome.
Well, and as you were saying, because it's in my mind, it when you're dealing with good players, it is about the pre measuring that
Mm-hmm.
the assault is most effective. One, like you were seeing this early on with like Bringers of Flame, where people were just YOLOing all of their tanks and being like, "Well, I can advance everything, so I am going to advance everything, and I'm just going to move up," and then they died. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so you
That was my experience. My experience was me
sure.
dying, but but
Well, okay, that was your
I think that was just a bad matchup for Tau.
sure. That's fair
Yeah.
enough. But I think the point still stands that the greatest power isn't necessarily when everything can advance so much as when anything can advance and shoot.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so I think that it's a fair trade to, like say lose assault on all of your guns and instead to get this. Like, I think that this is 80% of it. Now, sometimes you do really want to advance and shoot two things, but I think it's perfectly good to be able to advance and shoot one and to be able to threaten one, and then also to be able to, project out the rampagers and say, hey, look, not and if I really need to, if you're leaving out something squishy that I really want dead within their threat range, I can pay the 2 CP and auto advance and
Mm-hmm.
advance and charge. And
Yeah.
there are times where stuff like that makes and breaks games like very easily. I just played your brother the other night, and he
Mm-hmm.
rolled his blessings and didn't get advance and charge, and he's like, "Well, that's the game." Like, because he was out of position and he wasn't able to, get to my net expansion objective, and like, well, what are you gonna do? So
Yeah, that'll do it. Yeah, and I think so. Like one of the nice thing about this strat is you're still gonna have some units that have assault, right? So
sure.
like we'll talk about the next strat in a second here, but like breachers absolutely slam this detachment.
Oh yeah.
They can go up to strength 8, AP 2, rerolling wounds if you're on an objective. Like that's pretty freaking nasty. And they have assault natively, right? So if you're taking a couple units of breachers, you got to worry about their area of control, and then you're taking a cold star with melta unit, so you've got like 3 assault units on the table, and then one of your 4 other damage dealing units potentially could have assault as well. So it really gives you Um, a lot of opportunity, especially with like riptides, hammerheads, broadsides, for example. I love this as well. So
Sure.
yeah, lots of opportunity again in list building where you can kind of take this any way you want.
Yeah. Well, let's get to this last but certainly not least strat, guided fire. Not to be
Hmm.
not to be confused with being guided.
Yes.
Your shooting phase, one Tau Empire unit excluding crude and Vespids. Until the end of the phase, add 1 to the strength of the ranged characteristic of model weapons equipped. If your unit is wholly within 9 inches, so the wholly within I don't think matters as much since it's 9 inches,
Hmm.
of Crute or Vespid Stingwings units from your army, add 2 to the strength characteristic, which, wow. Yeah, that was there's your strength 8 breachers that you're talking about, wounding Marines on
Yeah.
2s now.
Yeah, this is I'm not gonna lie, this is pretty bananas. So one of
Yeah.
the like I don't sometimes when I hear like strength buffs, like you hear like oh +1 strength or +2 strength and like it doesn't really matter a ton of times, but for Tau it matters a lot. So I'll give a couple examples. So Riptides, there's their strength 8 normally with their ions. You give them +2 strength. That's effectively +2 to wound into T9, right?
Yep.
Because you're going from wounding on 5s to now wounding on 3s. Another example, which I would say is like, the biggest downfall of the Riptide. So now you just start melting through things like rhinos, transports, any of those T9 light vehicles, and then the other one is the Meltas. So going from
Mm-hmm.
strength 9 to strength 11 is a big deal because
That's a big one.
there's even with reroll wounds, they're super unreliable into anything that's T11 or higher. So now you get access to like, okay, anything that's T10 is now getting just melted because wounding on 3s rerolling is just way, way better than wounding on 5s rerolling. And the T11 stuff that's typically really tough for us to deal with, again, becomes a lot easier. So in combination with the AP5, I would say the Melta units probably are getting arguably stronger in this detachment than Retaliation Cadre, especially with the change to 6-inch deep strike. So I think this is probably the strongest strat in this suite. And you're just going to be pressing this button every single turn. Another unit that really likes it is the Ion Hammerheads. All of a sudden you're shooting D6 plus 3 blast, strength 10, AP 3 for 3, with the 2 Seeker missiles that are strength 16, AP 4 for D6 plus 1. Um, hitting on 2s against monsters and vehicles, rerolling 1s with a wound reroll. So it's just like, it just starts to get really gnarly really quickly. And
Yeah. This one makes me
it's really,
sad.
yeah, I'll give you another example, the plasmas. So like you put a plasma unit on the table, you put Farsight in the unit, Farsight and all the plasmas, it'll only be 8 shots, but it'll be strength 10, AP 4, 3 damage, full hit rerolls. If the unit has starting strength, it's just some nasty shit.
Yeah.
Is really what it is.
So I have a decent amount of experience playing against Tau with my Necrons in 10th and actually have yet to lose to Tau, mainly because I love running the Silent King and like a Catan and a Titanic unit. And
Mm-hmm.
okay, the T12 stuff you're still gonna struggle, but all of a sudden, the Meltas that were at best wounding the king on 4s, I mean now could be down to 2s,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
that's huge. That's why I mean I think with the Meltas it's the best, but +2 strength. I mean you see it with a few other things. I was talking to someone about the Tyrannus detachment. They got flat plus a strat that does flat +2 strength, and on Exocrines that's nasty. Malicephers is
Mm-hmm.
nasty, and then for Blood Angels losing, like if you were to go to the new detachment, losing the +2 strength on the charge, +2 strength in many situations can be +2 to wound.
Yeah.
It's it's not insignificant, and there's very rare situations where it's not at least +1 to wound. So
Mm-hmm.
this
And
is
we have there are a lot of Tau units that are right at that break point. They're strength 8. I forgot Farsight, by the way. He'll get the strength 10 AP 3 for 3, and then he'll also be +1 wounds. So
exactly,
then it's like, yeah,
yep.
then it gets like really gross. The only thing the detachment's missing, in my opinion, which is like can't get everything, but some access to sustained hits would be really nice, obviously. Um, with the Tau Empire units. So you're never going to be multiplying hits, unfortunately. So there's no like, lethal or sustained fives or anything like that. But um, either way, it's just like a straight buff to units that already shoot hard. And yeah, I think it's again, I love this attachment because it accentuates the strengths of both types of units, right?
Mm-hmm.
Both the damage dealers like and the crew. It makes the crew more survivable. It makes them better at what they already do, which is denial and screening, and like being able to stage effectively, scoring. Like you could just imagine, like in a shooting matchup, you get towards the end of the game, and your opponent has like 3 or 4 units left, and you have 3 or 4 units left, and guess what? Like two of yours are just lone up 18. So like if you're not within 18 inches, like I could stand out in the open, I could do a sabotage wherever I want. I could do recover assets wherever I want. So I think there's just, and then you get these damage buffs, so the extra AP, the plus 1 strength, um, plus one
Access
or two strength, and
access to potentially like real melee units,
yeah, which is huge,
which
right?
is huge because that's
Because
a huge gap for Tau.
yeah, and I think like it solves the issue into melee, right? Where you can put like that's why rampagers would be in the list to like sit behind the crew and say, hey, you're not just gonna like throw your entire army down my throat. Because if you do, I'm going to heroic with rampagers that do mortals on the charge, and they're gonna reroll wounds, and they're gonna get extra AP, and like you might just lose a unit in my turn,
Exactly.
which is a huge deal.
Now, I think that this is. I mean, I'm not a Tau player, but this seems scary to me. It seems particularly good given that the meta boogeyman is likely, Star Shatter Necrons for now. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that there are some super good tools here. The lone op is going to be super annoying, in that shooting matchup. I suspect most people running Star Shatter are not going to be taking a Catan, so you're not going to be seeing like a big melee threat, which means that your melee threats are even more impactful. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't actually really know what Ultramarines lists are going to look like. I don't think it's coalesced yet because the Space
Mm-hmm.
Marines book is just so wide open, and they've lost like the mainstay with the Eradicator, fire discipline brick. So we'll see
Yep.
what happens there. But this looks
We have a low.
yeah, this looks fun and good.
Yeah, I think that's the name of the game is something that Tau players should be excited for. Um, we got something new to play with, and it seems legit. To be seen if it's stronger than the other detachments. Maybe it's just recency bias, but it feels like it has a better place in today's meta than the other detachments do. I will say, like at least in our local meta, the most popular version of Ultramarines is looking like it's going to be Vanguard,
Mm-hmm.
and um, like really just the best detachment. But the best player in our area, he's going to be running Ultramarines Vanguard. His name is Ben Neal, and so he'll have the Dev Scent brick. He'll have the Marnius Calgar with the group of company heroes, a few Inceptors units. But bottom line is this is going to play pretty well into that because of the
Yeah,
lone up 18. You can't just set up like a bazillion miles away with that Dev Scent brick and expect to pick off Groot. So it'll out OC the company heroes brick on their objective. Another really cool thing you could do is charge something like one of his rhinos and then use the fallback strat to get within 3 of the dev sense, and then they have to stay where they're at. So there are a lot of counters, I think, to that list. Um, so yeah, we'll see. I think, and I think Star Shatter, to your point, like you might see more inclusions of things like Sky Rays. So Sky Rays get full hit rerolls against fly units, and they get full wound rerolls. They're twin linked, and they'll be AP4, which won't matter as much for you just because you have everything on 4 up invulns, but AP4 last cannons are pretty nice. And yeah, I gotta play some Star Shatter. I think like we should get a game in soon.
we should.
It seems really nasty. I think you know when I was talking to my buddy about it, he was like, I can't remember which Advanced Army came out. I think it was Sisters, and he was just talking about how the army that has more coverage of angles, like the shooting army that has more coverage of angles, is just going to always win the matchup. Like because Bringers of Flame can move like 20 inches, um, and I can't get to the angles that they can stage in places where they can hit me, and I can't hit them. Like you just lose that matchup. And I think not only the advanced shoot, but it's the move through walls, which just completely changes that matchup.
And the
Um,
reactive move after getting shot.
yeah, and the react exactly because Tau really struggles to just like one shot things, especially with
Maybe
invuln.
not
So
now though. I mean, because
yeah, well,
Doomsday arcs are only T9, so.
true.
And I was actually
That's
going to
true.
say, I don't even know that this is the loss of sustained is the worst thing for you because if you can, I mean, it's not like there you don't have access to volume regardless, and now you can make
Hmm.
that volume super nasty on
True.
command. I
Yep.
actually think that it's totally fine. I mean, you might just be taking a few more guns that you haven't seen before because they'll just kind of fit the all rounder profile. But
Sure. Yeah, that's a great point. Like another unit that comes to mind is the broadside. There's a broadsides unit with high yield missile pods, um,
yeah,
and they're twin linked. So they'll be
yep.
strength 7 AP 2 for 2, 8 shots apiece, um, rerolling ones to hit. You can take a war gear to ignore hit mods, and then all of a sudden you're shooting 24 shots at strength 7 AP 2 for 2 with twin linked, which is
I so
that'll do the trick.
we'll get into it. You and I we're gonna run a game at some point soon, and then we're gonna make a video
Yeah.
together for your channel about how to play against Star Shatter. But one little
Mhm.
teaser on that is twin linked lower strength is actually very good into Star Shatter because Star Shatter
Mm.
for durability is relying on the if strength is greater than toughness, then -1 to wound. That does not
Sure.
apply to twin linked. Wounding on
Yep.
fives twin linked is basically mathematically equivalent to wounding on fours, and there's no way
Interesting. Yep.
around it. So, but we'll get there. I
Oh yeah.
think I think this. I'm looking forward. Are you gonna run this against Star Shatter when we do our TTS game?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I only have so many games left in me before there's a GT. I'm not going to LVO, unfortunately. We have a GT
Ah,
January 11th and 12th. Yeah, I had to, new job kind of kicked me in the nards a little bit there. But there's a GT January 11th and 12th, and I'm going home for till January 1st or 2nd, so I'll only have like 3 or 4 games in me before I lock in a list, and so this will be one of them. I definitely want to play this. To be honest with you, I was considering bringing a different army to the GT just because the loss of Retaliation Cadre's 3 inch just left a bad taste in my mouth. Like I was
yeah,
considering Kalyan, but I own a Custodes army, so I thought the Dreadnought spam was pretty cool. And the other army that actually kind of popped to me a little bit, which would be obviously very new, is the new Corn Detachment. Um, I just think I love the damage in that thing,
yeah,
and like the ability to score primary. Again, like that's the one area of 40k that's been really kind of annoying for me to interact with is like just trying to scrape primary off my opponents. And yeah, just having that like bubble of like, okay, if you come within 6 inches, I can just blood surge into you and kill you in your own movement phase sounded pretty fun. So,
yeah.
but yeah, with this popping in the mix, I'm definitely gonna play this. I think.
Nice. Well, looking forward to it, and thanks for coming on the show. This
Yeah,
has
man.
been fun.
Yeah, likewise, man. Yeah, exciting day for top players, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you having me.